I was stirring the soup when my son slammed the ladle against my head. The pain shot through my temple as the metal connected with bone. Tyler towered over me, his face twisted with contempt. "Move, old man." "Who cooks like that?" he snarled, yanking the utensil from my trembling hand. I said nothing, frozen by shock more than physical hurt. This was my boy, my only child. The soup spattered across the stove as he stirred violently. Something inside me cracked deeper than any bruise could show. The morning Tyler called asking to move back home, I had been sorting through Susan's cookbooks. 3 years after losing her to cancer, I still found myself reaching for her side of the bed each morning. The house felt too big for just me, its emptiness echoing with memories. "Dad, I need a place to stay for a while," Tyler had said, his voice tight. "Things fell apart with Jessica. The divorce is final next month. What about your job?" I asked, knowing he'd been with the marketing firm in Chicago for nearly a decade. A pause. "That's over too. Company restructuring." I didn't press for details. My son needed help, and I had a spare room that used to be his. What father would say no? "Of course you can come home, Tyler. Stay as long as you need." I spent the next 3 days preparing. I cleaned his old bedroom, washed the sheets, and dusted the shelves that still held his high school football trophies. I drove to the grocery store and filled the cart with the foods he'd loved as a teenager. I even pulled out old photo albums, thinking we might reminisce about happier times. When he arrived, I hardly recognized him. At 36, Tyler had always been fit and meticulous about his appearance. The man who stood on my doorstep looked 10 years older. His face was bloated, his eyes bloodshot, his once trim physique gone soft. He carried only 2 suitcases. "This all you brought?" I asked, reaching for one. He shrugged. "Left most stuff with Jessica. Didn't want the reminders." The first few days were awkward. Tyler slept until noon, spent hours on his phone, and disappeared in the evenings without saying where he was going. I tried to give him space, remembering how hard my own divorce had been decades ago, before I met Susan. "You want to talk about what happened?" I ventured over breakfast one morning. "Sometimes it helps." "Nothing to talk about," he muttered, staring at his phone. "Jessica turned into a controlling witch, and the job was crushing me. End of story." I nodded, not believing him but unwilling to push. "Well, I'm here if you change your mind." That's when I started noticing things. The way he'd sneak glances at my prescription bottles in the bathroom. How the level in the whiskey bottle dropped each night, even when he wasn't home. The strange calls he'd take outside, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. But most concerning was the anger simmering just beneath the surface. A cupboard door slammed too hard. A curse when he couldn't find the remote. Small things, but warning signs I chose to ignore. Then came the day of the soup incident. I'd decided to make Susan's potato and leek soup an old family favorite. Tyler had loved it as a child. I thought it might bring us closer, share something of his mother with him. I was carefully adding seasoning the way Susan had taught me, when Tyler stormed in. He'd been out all day and smelled of alcohol. The moment he saw me at the stove, something in his expression darkened. After he hit me with the ladle, after he'd shouted those words at me, after he'd stormed out without eating, I sat at the kitchen table alone. The soup grew cold. I touched my temple and winced at the tenderness. A bruise was forming. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time since Tyler had moved in. Lying in the dark, I wondered where I'd gone wrong as a father. What had happened to the bright, ambitious boy who'd once told me he wanted to make me proud? When I got up the next morning, Tyler was already gone. In the trash, hidden beneath coffee grounds, I found 3 empty whiskey bottles. A week after the ladle incident, I noticed my pain medication was running low. I'd had knee replacement surgery 6 months earlier, and while I rarely needed the pills anymore, I kept them for bad days. The bottle should have been nearly full. I stood in the bathroom, counting the remaining tablets. 23 missing. I'd taken maybe 5 since my last refill. That afternoon, while Tyler was out, I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make as a parent. I went into his room, not to snoop, I told myself, but to understand what was happening to my son. The room was a mess. Clothes strewn everywhere, fast food wrappers crumpled on the floor, empty beer cans lined up on the dresser. I picked up a pair of jeans from the floor, intending to put them in the hamper, when something fell from the pocket. A pawn shop receipt. My heart sank. I pulled open his dresser drawer and found more receipts. Electronics, watches, jewelry. With shaking hands, I went to my bedroom and opened the small wooden box where I kept Susan's jewelry. Her wedding ring was gone. The pearl necklace I'd given her on our 25th anniversary. The diamond earrings from her parents. All gone. I sat on the edge of my bed, receipt clutched in my hand, when I heard the front door open. Tyler was home. Before I could decide what to do, he appeared in my doorway. "What's that?" he asked, eyes narrowing on the paper in my hand. I held it up. "You want to explain this? Or why your mother's jewelry is missing?" Something ugly flashed across his face. Not shame, not regret. Anger. "You going through my stuff now?" "Real nice, Dad. Real trusting." "Trust?" My voice cracked. "You stole your dead mother's wedding ring and pawned it. You've been taking my medication. What happened to you, Tyler?" He stepped into the room, and for the first time in my life, I felt physically afraid of my own child. He was 6 inches taller than me, and despite his softer physique, still stronger than a 68-year-old man with a bad knee. "What happened to me?" he snarled. "You want to know what happened. You trapped me in this dead-end town. You and Mom, always saying I should be practical instead of supporting my real dreams. Then I busted my ass for 10 years making good money. And for what? To have it all fall apart anyway." The unfairness of his words stunned me. "We paid for your college. We supported you when you moved to Chicago. Your mother was so proud of you. Yeah, well, she's not here anymore, is she? And now I'm stuck back in this pathetic house with you." He gestured dismissively around the room. "You owe me. After everything I've been through, you owe me some help." "Help doesn't mean letting you steal from me," I said, standing up despite my knee protesting. "I want you to get those things back from the pawn shop, especially your mother's ring." Tyler laughed, a cold sound I'd never heard from him before. Too late. Money's already spent. He turned to leave, but I caught his arm. "Spent on what? Are you in some kind of trouble?" He yanked away from me. "Just drop it, old man, and stay out of my room." That night, unable to sleep, I went downstairs for a glass of water. Voices from the living room stopped me. Tyler was on the phone. "He's got plenty of equity in this place," he was saying quietly. "If I can convince him to do a reverse mortgage, we're talking at least $200,000, maybe more." I stood frozen in the darkness of the hallway. "No, he doesn't suspect anything," Tyler continued. "He's lonely and desperate to help his son. Classic easy mark. Give me 2 more weeks." I retreated silently to my room, my heart pounding. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to take everything I had. The next morning I called Jessica. It had been over a year since I'd spoken to my daughter-in-law, and I hated bothering her after the divorce. But I needed answers. "Dean, is everything okay?" Her voice was guarded. "Not really, Jessica. Tyler's living with me now, and I'm concerned. He says he lost his job due to restructuring." A long silence. "He told you that? That's not what happened?" She sighed heavily. "Dean, Tyler wasn't let go. He was asked to resign. There was money missing from client accounts. A lot of money. They gave him the option to leave quietly instead of pressing charges." The room seemed to tilt around me. "And the divorce?" "He said you changed, became controlling." A bitter laugh. "I changed? I spent 3 years trying to get him help for his gambling. He emptied our savings, maxed out credit cards, took loans I knew nothing about. When I finally gave him an ultimatum, therapy or divorce, he chose divorce." My free hand gripped the kitchen counter for support. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "Has he asked you for money yet?" she asked. "Not directly, but I found receipts. He's been pawning things, including his mother's jewelry." "That sounds like Tyler," she said sadly. "He did the same to his Aunt Marge. borrowed $10,000 for a business opportunity that never existed. He hasn't paid her back a dime. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The son I thought I knew was a stranger to me. A liar, a thief, possibly an addict. What was I supposed to do now? The next morning, I went to my bank. The young woman at the desk seemed concerned when I explained I wanted to check for any unusual activity on my accounts. "Can I see your ID, Mr. Walker?" she asked, typing on her computer. Her expression changed as she looked at the screen. There have been several transfers from your savings account in the past 2 weeks. Were those authorized by you?" My stomach dropped. "How much?" "4 transfers. $1,500 each. $6,000 total." I hadn't made any transfers. To where? She checked. "To a checking account at First National. Not one of your accounts." Tyler had accessed my online banking somehow. Perhaps he'd watched me enter my password or found it written down in my desk. "I need to secure my accounts," I said, "and report these as fraudulent transfers." By the time I got home, I had canceled all my debit cards, changed my online banking password, and placed a fraud alert with the bank. They assured me they'd investigate the unauthorized transfers, but the process could take weeks. Tyler's car wasn't in the driveway when I arrived, which was a relief. I needed time to figure out what to do next. But as I was making a sandwich for lunch, he walked in the back door. "We need to talk," I said firmly. He ignored me, heading for the refrigerator. "Tyler, I know about the transfers from my savings account. I know you took $6,000 without my permission." He froze, then slowly turned to face me. "So what? You weren't using it." The casualness of his response shocked me. "That's theft. It's illegal." "It's family helping family," he countered, grabbing a beer. "Something you don't seem to understand. I've given you a place to live. Food, utilities, all without asking for anything in return. That's help. What you're doing is stealing." "You don't get it," he said, his voice rising. "I'm in a hole here, Dad. A deep hole. And you sitting on all this money, this house, while I'm drowning? That's not right. If you needed money, you could have asked. We could have discussed it. But you chose to steal from me instead. Would you have given me $6,000 if I asked?" He took a step toward me, his expression darkening. I stood my ground. "Probably not. Not without knowing what it was for." "Exactly." He slammed the beer bottle on the counter. "Because you don't trust me. You never have." "Tyler, you pawned your dead mother's wedding ring," I said, my voice breaking. "How am I supposed to trust you after that?" What happened next occurred so fast, I barely had time to react. Tyler lunged forward, grabbing me by the front of my shirt, and shoved me hard against the wall. My head snapped back, hitting the plaster with a thud. "Listen to me, old man," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You're going to help me out of this mess, or things are going to get much worse for you. Understand?" Fear coursed through me. This wasn't my son anymore. This was someone I didn't recognize. "Get your hands off me," I managed to say. "Dean? Everything okay in there?" A voice called from the back porch. "Hal Jenkins, my next-door neighbor for 20 years. Tyler released me immediately, stepping back. "We're fine," he called, his tone suddenly normal. "Just a little family discussion." Hal appeared in the doorway, his weathered face concerned. He looked at me, then at Tyler, clearly sensing the tension. "Thought I'd return your hedge trimmers," Hal said slowly, setting them on the counter. His eyes never left my face. "You sure everything's all right, Dean?" "We're good," Tyler answered before I could speak. "Right, Dad?" I looked at my son, at the warning in his eyes, then at Hal. "Actually, Hal, would you mind giving me a hand with something out in the garage? Just need help moving a few things." Tyler's jaw tightened, but he didn't protest as Hal and I walked outside. Once in the garage, Hal turned to me. "What's going on, Dean? I saw him push you through the window. The dam broke." I told Hal everything. The stealing, the pawned jewelry, the fraudulent bank transfers, what Jessica had revealed about the gambling and job loss. By the end, I was fighting back tears of shame and frustration. "You can't stay there with him," Hal said firmly. Not while he's like this. It's not safe. He's my son, I said weakly. And he's a grown man who's stealing from you, and now getting physical. You need to set boundaries before this gets worse. I knew Hal was right, but the thought of confronting Tyler again filled me with dread. I don't know what to do. For starters, you could file a police report about the theft, Hal suggested. And tell him he has to leave. I can't throw my own son out on the street, I protested. Then at least come stay with Linda and me for a few days while you figure things out. Give yourself some space to think clearly. I declined Hal's offer, unable to abandon my home despite the tension. But after he left, I drove to the cemetery where Susan was buried. I needed guidance from the only person who had always helped me see things clearly. The afternoon sun warmed the granite headstone as I sat on the small bench beside her grave. I don't know what to do, Suze, I whispered, using my old nickname for her. Tyler's in trouble. Real trouble. But I don't think I can help him if he won't admit he has a problem. No answer came, of course. Just the rustle of leaves and distant traffic. But sitting there, I felt a clarity begin to form. Susan would never have tolerated Tyler's behavior, no matter how much she loved him. She would have confronted it head-on, with the tough love she was known for. On my way home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small security camera. If Tyler was bringing strangers into my house or taking more of my belongings, I needed proof. The hidden camera revealed more than I was prepared to see. I installed it discreetly on a bookshelf in the living room, angled to capture most of the main floor. The first night yielded nothing unusual. The second night, Tyler brought home a woman I didn't recognize. They disappeared upstairs for a few hours, then left together. It was the third night that chilled me to the bone. Tyler came home around 11 with two men. One was tall and wiry with tattooed arms, the other shorter with a shaved head. They weren't social guests. They moved through my house with purpose, opening drawers, examining electronics, looking at the few pieces of art Susan and I had collected over the years. Television's older, but we could get something for it, the tall one said, running his hand along the frame of my TV. What about upstairs? My dad's got a nice watch, Tyler replied. Rolex. Anniversary gift from my mom. Probably worth a few grand. And there's some other stuff we could clear out when he's not around. They were casing my house for items to steal. My own son was planning to rob me. I zoomed in on the shorter man's face, freezing the video. Something about him seemed familiar. I uploaded the image to my computer and searched online for local news reports about break-ins or thefts. After an hour of searching, I found him. Jack Reeves, arrested 2 years ago for a string of home invasions targeting elderly residents. And now he was in my living room, invited by my son. I called Jessica again. Does Tyler have connections to loan sharks? I asked without preamble. A sharp intake of breath. How did you know? He brought men to my house. They were looking at things to steal. Dean, this is serious. When Tyler's gambling was at its worst, he borrowed money from some very dangerous people. It's part of why I finally left. I was afraid they might come after us for what he owed. How much are we talking about? Last I knew, over $50,000. But that was months ago. The interest on those loans. It could be much more now. After hanging up, I sat in my study, trying to process this information. My son owed money to criminals. He was planning to rob his own father to pay them. How had it come to this? The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Is Tyler Walker there? A man's voice demanded when I answered. No, he's not home right now. Can I take a message? Yeah, tell him, Vince called. Tell him he's got 3 days to come up with the money, or we start breaking things. Starting with his fingers. The line went dead before I could respond. That night, the stress finally caught up with me. A crushing pain spread across my chest as I was getting ready for bed. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just anxiety, but when the pain radiated down my left arm and I broke into a cold sweat, I knew I needed help. I managed to call 911 before collapsing onto the bathroom floor. The emergency room was bright and chaotic. Doctors moved around me with practiced efficiency, attaching monitors, drawing blood, asking questions I struggled to answer through the haze of pain. "Mr. Walker, you're having what we call an acute coronary syndrome," the doctor explained later, after the pain medication had kicked in. "Not a full heart attack, but a warning sign. Your EKG shows significant stress on your heart. Will I be okay?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "You're stable for now, but we need to run more tests. Have you been under unusual stress lately?" I almost laughed. "You could say that. Is there someone we can call for you? Family?" "Tyler, my only child. The cause of this heart episode." "I tried my son already," I lied. "He's not answering." The nurse looked sympathetic. "We'll keep trying. You shouldn't be alone right now." But I was alone. More alone than I'd been since Susan died. As I lay in the hospital bed, watching the monitor track my heartbeat, a terrible clarity settled over me. This situation with Tyler wasn't just costing me financially. It was literally killing me. Morning came. The cardiologist confirmed I hadn't had a major heart attack, but my heart was showing signs of damage from prolonged stress. "Your body is sending you a warning, Mr. Walker," he said gravely. "Whatever is causing this level of stress in your life, you need to address it. Your heart can't sustain this." I was discharged that afternoon with new prescriptions and strict instructions to rest. The hospital had tried Tyler's number multiple times with no response. Hal picked me up instead, his face tight with concern. "That boy didn't even come when his father was in the hospital," he muttered as he drove me home. "That tells you everything you need to know, Dean." When we arrived at my house, Tyler's car was gone. Inside, I discovered my checkbook missing from my desk drawer. A cold dread settled over me as I called the bank. My suspicion was confirmed. Tyler had written and cashed 3 checks in my name, totaling $4,000. Forgery. On top of theft, planning burglary, and bringing criminals into my home. "This has to stop," Hal said firmly. "You need to report him to the police before he drains you dry, or worse." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. My son was out of control, and my misguided attempts to help him were enabling his destructive behavior. For both our sakes, I needed to take action. But first, I decided to make one last attempt to reach the son I remembered. I would cook Susan's soup again, this time as a final peace offering. If Tyler rejected it again, I would have my answer. The soup simmered on the stove, filling the kitchen with the comforting aroma of potatoes, leeks, and herbs. I stirred it slowly, my mind racing despite my attempts to focus on the simple task. The events of the past weeks played through my head like scenes from a stranger's life. Not my life, not my son. I heard the front door slam. Tyler was home, earlier than usual. His uneven footsteps told me he'd been drinking again. "What's that smell?" he asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes rumpled. "Your mother's potato leek soup?" I said quietly. "I thought we could have dinner together. Talk about some things." He snorted, moving closer to peer into the pot. "Still can't cook it right, can you? You're stirring it all wrong." "There's a proper way to stir soup?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light despite the tension thrumming through me. "Mom never let it get all thick and gloopy like that," he said with disgust. "You're overcooking it." I continued stirring calmly. "The recipe says to simmer for 30 minutes. It's been 20. Give me that." Tyler reached for the ladle in my hand. "You're doing it wrong." I held on to the utensil. "I've got it, Tyler." His face darkened. Always so stubborn. Just like with everything else. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you never listen. Not to me. Not to Mom. Not to anyone." He yanked the ladle from my grip and swung it hard, connecting with the side of my head for the second time in recent weeks. Pain exploded above my ear. I staggered back, more from shock than injury. "Who cooks like this?" he shouted, gesturing wildly with the ladle, stirring in circles like some amateur. "Mom always folded it. Like this." He plunged the ladle into the soup and sloshed it around violently. "Tyler, stop," I said, reaching for him. He shoved me away, hard enough that I stumbled against the counter. "Don't touch me. You think I don't know what you're doing? Checking up on me? Calling Jessica behind my back? I'm worried about you, I said, pressing a hand to my throbbing temple. This behavior, the drinking, the stealing, the gambling debts, this isn't you. You don't know me, he roared, suddenly grabbing the entire pot of soup and hurling it to the floor. Steaming liquid splashed everywhere, the pot clanging against the tile. In that moment, something inside me finally broke. The last thread of patience, of misguided hope that my son would somehow snap out of this destructive spiral, severed completely. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the kitchen. That's right, walk away, Tyler shouted after me. Just like always, I went straight to his bedroom and began pulling his clothes from the dresser, stuffing them into his suitcases. I emptied his closet, grabbed his toiletries from the bathroom, collected every item that belonged to him from around the house. It took less than 5 minutes. Then I broke the lock on his bedroom door with a screwdriver, something I'd never have done in normal circumstances. I needed access to his room going forward. This was my house, not his criminal playground. I carried everything to the front yard and dumped it on the lawn. The suitcases, the clothes, all of it. The sound of the front door banging against the siding as I kicked it open with my foot must have been what Tyler heard. I was on the phone with the police when he came running out to the front yard, his face a mask of confusion. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher asked. I need to report theft and assault, I said clearly, looking directly at Tyler. My son has stolen money from my accounts, forged checks in my name, and physically assaulted me twice. I have video evidence of him bringing known criminals into my home to plan additional theft. Tyler's face drained of color. Dad, what are you doing? My name is Dean Walker. I continued to the dispatcher. My address is 1420 Oak Street. I'd like an officer to come document the situation. Officers are on their way, sir, the dispatcher assured me. Are you in immediate danger? I looked at my son, standing amid his scattered belongings on the front lawn. The anger had drained from his face, replaced by something that might have been fear. No, I said finally. I don't believe I am. Not anymore. Dad, hang up, Tyler pleaded, stepping toward me. We can work this out. I held up a hand to stop him. Don't come any closer, Tyler. I've made my decision. What decision? His voice cracked. What are you talking about? You're not living here anymore. You're not taking anything else from me. And you're going to face consequences for what you've already done. You're choosing money over your own son? He asked incredulously. No. I'm choosing not to enable your self-destruction anymore. I'm choosing to stop letting you drag us both down. And I'm choosing to stop letting you disrespect your mother's memory by pawning her jewelry to pay gambling debts. His face contorted. You don't understand what I'm dealing with. These aren't people you can just avoid paying. I know exactly who you owe money to, I said, surprising him. Vince called here looking for you, threatened to break your fingers if you don't pay in 3 days. Tyler's eyes widened. He called here? At this number? Yes, which means they know where I live, where I sleep. The house you've put at risk because of your addiction. Blue and red lights flashed at the end of the street. A police cruiser approached slowly, followed by a second one. Dad, please, Tyler begged, panic rising in his voice. Don't do this. For a moment, I almost wavered. This was my child. Despite everything, I loved him. But then I remembered the doctor's words. Your heart can't sustain this stress. I remembered the men in my living room, eyeing my possessions. I remembered the contempt in Tyler's eyes as he'd struck me with the ladle. I'm doing what I should have done weeks ago, I said softly. Sometimes love means setting boundaries, even when it hurts. The police officers approached cautiously, taking in the scene of scattered luggage and the tension between us. Mr. Walker? One asked. You called about theft and assault? I nodded. Yes. I'd like to file a report. As I began explaining the situation to the officers, showing them the bruise on my temple from the ladle, describing the stolen medication, the pawned jewelry, the forged checks, and unauthorized bank transfers, something unexpected happened. A sharp pain knifed through my chest, stealing my breath. The world tilted sideways, and I was dimly aware of voices shouting as I collapsed onto the grass. "Dad!" Tyler's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Dad, no!" Then darkness swept over me like a wave, pulling me under. I awoke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the antiseptic smell that seems universal to all medical facilities. For a moment, I couldn't remember how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The confrontation with Tyler, the police, the sudden, crushing chest pain. A nurse noticed I was awake and came to check my vitals. "Welcome back, Mr. Walker. How are you feeling?" "Like an elephant is sitting on my chest," I croaked, my throat dry. "What happened?" "You had a mild heart attack," she explained, adjusting my IV. "The doctor will be in shortly to explain everything." "My son," I began, then stopped, uncertain what to ask. Was he arrested? Did he leave? Did he even care that I was here? "Several people have been trying to visit you," the nurse said carefully. "But you're in the cardiac ICU right now. Immediate family only, and you left specific instructions about your son." I frowned, not remembering giving any instructions. The cardiologist arrived a few minutes later, a serious-looking woman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Walker, I'm Dr. Abrams. You've had what we call a NSTEMI, a type of heart attack where blood flow to part of your heart was temporarily reduced. We've stabilized you, but I'm concerned about the recurrence. This is your second cardiac event in less than a week. Am I going to be okay? Your latest tests show significant blockage in 2 coronary arteries. You need bypass surgery, and soon. We'd like to schedule it for tomorrow morning." The gravity of the situation sank in. "Heart surgery, tomorrow. Is there anyone you'd like us to contact?" Dr. Abrams asked. "The nurses mentioned you didn't want your son notified, but perhaps someone else?" A dim memory surfaced. In the ambulance or emergency room, someone asking about family. Me, barely conscious but adamant. "Not my son. Don't call my son. My neighbor, Hal Jenkins," I said finally. "His number should be in my phone." The hours that followed passed in a blur of tests, consultations, and paperwork. Nurses came and went. A hospital chaplain stopped by. An anesthesiologist explained the procedure. All the while, a hollow feeling grew inside me. I might die tomorrow, and my only child didn't even know I was here. Not because he couldn't be reached, but because I'd shut him out. Hal visited that evening, his weathered face lined with worry. "They said you need bypass surgery?" I nodded. "Tomorrow morning. Triple bypass." He squeezed my hand. "You're going to be fine, Dean. You're strong." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel tired, and old, and alone." "You're not alone," Hal assured me. "Linda and I are here for you. And there's something else you should know." He hesitated. "Tyler's been calling everyone. Me, the neighbors, your old colleagues from the high school. He's desperate to find out how you are." A complicated tangle of emotions knotted in my chest. The police didn't arrest him? They took a report, but said they needed to investigate before pressing charges. The paramedics were already working on you, and I think everyone's focus shifted to your medical emergency. "Has he been back to the house?" "No," Hal said firmly. "I made it clear he wasn't welcome, and the neighbors are keeping an eye out." "He's staying with someone named Garrett?" "Says he was a student of yours. Garrett Phillips." I remembered him well. Bright kid who'd gone on to become a family therapist. I'd kept in touch over the years, occasionally meeting for coffee to catch up. "Tyler called Garrett?" "Apparently. And Garrett called me this morning. He wanted me to tell you something." Hal shifted uncomfortably. "Tyler's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and gambling addiction. He was in treatment for a while in Chicago, but stopped taking his medication months ago. Garrett thinks the current behavior, the aggression, impulsiveness, reckless spending, it's partly due to an untreated manic episode." The information hit me like another shock to the system. My son was mentally ill, not just making bad choices. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped explain the dramatic personality change I'd witnessed. "Why didn't he tell me?" I whispered. "Garrett said Tyler was ashamed. Didn't want you to see him as crazy or broken. Hal shook his head. The kid's got a lot of pride, like his father. Before leaving, Hal promised to be at the hospital for my surgery the next day. I thanked him, then asked for one more favor. Could you ask Garrett to come see me? Before the surgery? Garrett arrived early the next morning, looking much the same as when he'd sat in my history class 15 years earlier, though with a neatly trimmed beard and professional attire. His familiar face was a welcome sight. "Mr. Walker," he said warmly, taking the chair beside my bed. "It's good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Call me Dean, please," I insisted. "You're not my student anymore." We talked for a while about his practice, his family, catching up on the years since we'd last met. Then, inevitably, the conversation turned to Tyler. "He's staying with you?" I asked. Garrett nodded. "In my guest room. Under strict conditions, no alcohol, daily therapy sessions, and he started medication again." Hal told me about the bipolar diagnosis. "Tyler's dealing with dual diagnoses," Garrett explained gently. "The gambling addiction and bipolar disorder feed into each other. During manic episodes, the impulsivity makes the gambling worse. The financial stress from gambling triggers more severe mood episodes. It's a difficult cycle to break." Why didn't he ever tell me? The question that had been haunting me all night. Garrett considered this carefully. "Tyler has always felt he needed to be perfect in your eyes. Even back in high school, he talked about not wanting to disappoint you and Mrs. Walker. When things started falling apart for him, he couldn't bear to admit it. Then the small deceptions grew into bigger ones. And stealing from me? Bringing criminals into my home? Was that just part of his illness?" "No," Garrett said firmly. "Mental illness helps explain behavior but doesn't excuse it. Tyler made choices harmful, destructive choices. He needs to be held accountable for those actions while also getting treatment for his conditions. Is he truly remorseful? Or just sorry he got caught?" "He's devastated," Garrett said simply. "Not just about getting caught, but about hurting you, about almost losing you in multiple ways." "I don't know if I can trust him again," I admitted. "Trust takes time to rebuild," Garrett agreed. "And it requires consistent action, not just words. Tyler understands that." "Does he?" I wasn't convinced. "He wrote you a letter," Garrett said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "He wasn't sure if you'd be willing to see him, so he asked me to give you this. You can read it now or later, or not at all. It's entirely your choice." I took the envelope but set it aside. "Thank you for coming, Garrett, and for helping Tyler. He's got a long road ahead," Garrett warned. "Recovery isn't linear. There will be setbacks. But with proper treatment and support, people with these conditions can lead stable, productive lives." After Garrett left, a nurse came to prepare me for surgery. As she checked my vitals one final time, I picked up Tyler's letter. Whatever it contained, excuses, apologies, promises, would have to wait. I placed it in the drawer of the bedside table. "Ready, Mr. Walker?" the nurse asked kindly. No, I wasn't ready. Not for open-heart surgery. Not for the complicated path forward with my son. Not for any of it. But I nodded anyway. As ready as I'll ever be. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took effect was thinking of Susan, wondering if she would approve of how I'd handled things with our son. The surgery was successful, though recovery was slower than I'd hoped. 4 days in the cardiac ICU, followed by another week in a regular hospital room. Hal and Linda visited daily, bringing flowers, books, and news from the neighborhood. Garrett came twice, giving updates on Tyler's progress with treatment. "He's been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings," Garrett reported, "and he's responding well to the medication. The mood stabilizers take time to reach full effectiveness, but we're already seeing improvement." "Good," I said, meaning it despite my lingering hurt and anger. "That's good." "He's still asking to see you," Garrett added cautiously. "When you're ready, of course." I wasn't ready. Not yet. But as the days passed and my strength gradually returned, I found myself thinking more about Tyler's letter, still unread in the bedside drawer. On my last day in the hospital, As I waited for discharge paperwork, I finally opened it. The handwriting was familiar, though shakier than I remembered. "Dad," it began. "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need to write it anyway. There's no excuse for what I've done. None. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible ways. I stole from you. I brought dangerous people into your home. I treated you with contempt when you were only trying to help me. I pawned Mom's jewelry, including her wedding ring, which I know is unforgivable. I've been sick for a long time. The gambling started in college, but it was manageable at first. Just poker games with friends, then online betting, then casinos. By the time I realized I couldn't stop, I was already in deep. The bipolar diagnosis came 3 years ago, after Jessica found me in a hotel room where I'd been awake for 4 days straight, convinced I had a foolproof system for winning at blackjack. I had maxed out our credit cards and emptied our savings. I tried treatment. For a while, it worked. The medications leveled me out. Therapy helped with the gambling urges, but I hated how flat the meds made me feel. I hated being broken. So I stopped taking them, told myself I could manage on my own. You know how the story goes from there. I'm not telling you this to make excuses. What I did was wrong. Period. I hurt the one person who has always been there for me, and I'll carry that shame forever. I don't expect or deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm getting help now, real help. And whatever happens between us, I'm going to stay with the treatment this time. I love you, Dad. I'm so sorry for everything. Tyler. I folded the letter and put it back in its envelope, my vision blurred with tears. It wasn't a magic fix. Words on paper couldn't undo the damage or rebuild trust overnight. But it was a start, a recognition of wrongdoing, an acknowledgement of illness, a commitment to change. When Hal arrived to drive me home from the hospital, I made a decision. "Could you ask Garrett to bring Tyler for a supervised visit next week?" I requested. "Just a short one, once I'm settled at home." Hal looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, if you're sure you're ready." "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I need to start somewhere." 6 months after my heart surgery, life had found a new rhythm. Following my cardiologist's advice to reduce stress, I'd made significant changes. The most dramatic was converting the basement of my house into a comfortable apartment for myself, complete with bedroom, bath, small kitchen, and living area. I rented the main house to a young family, the Parkers, with 2 small children. Their laughter and energy filled the home in ways it hadn't seen since Tyler was young. My health had improved steadily. Cardiac rehabilitation, a better diet, and regular walks with Hal had strengthened my heart. The scars on my chest had faded from angry red to pale pink, much like the emotional wounds I'd carried. Tyler had made progress too. 9 months sober. Regular therapy with Garrett. Consistent with his medication. He'd found a job at the local hardware store. Nothing glamorous but steady work where the owner, Jim Dalton, knew about his recovery and supported it. Tyler lived in a halfway house downtown, sharing space with other men working through various addictions and mental health challenges. Our relationship was a work in progress. The supervised visits with Garrett had gradually extended to longer meetings, then occasional outings without supervision. We were rebuilding trust one small step at a time. I still had Tyler's letter, tucked away in my bedside table. Sometimes I read it again, not to dwell on the past pain but to remind myself of how far we'd come. Today was a milestone. I'd invited Tyler for dinner, just the 2 of us, no intermediaries. I was making Susan's potato leek soup. The familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables was soothing. Leeks, potatoes, garlic, all cut into careful, even pieces, the way Susan had taught me. The ingredients simmered in chicken broth, filling my small basement apartment with comforting aromas. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Tyler stood on the threshold, a bunch of supermarket flowers clutched awkwardly in one hand. "These are for you," he said, holding them out. "I remember Mom always liked fresh flowers in the kitchen." "Thank you." I accepted them, noting how different he looked from the last time he'd stood in my kitchen. The bloated face and bloodshot eyes were gone. He'd lost weight, cut his hair short, and stood straighter. He looked more like the son I remembered. "Something smells good," he commented, following me inside. "Your mother's soup," I said, filling a small vase with water for the flowers. "It's almost ready." An uncertain silence fell between us. These moments still happened, little pockets of awkwardness where neither of us quite knew what to say. How do you make small talk with someone who's seen you at your worst? Who's hurt you deeply, but is trying to make amends? "Can I help with anything?" Tyler asked finally. I hesitated only briefly. "You could season the soup, actually. It's ready for the final herbs." A flicker of recognition crossed his face. He knew the significance of this task. The last time I'd made this soup, he'd hit me with a ladle and told me I was doing it wrong. "I'd like that," he said quietly. I showed him where I'd prepared the herbs, thyme, parsley, a touch of tarragon, and handed him a wooden spoon, not a ladle. That seemed like tempting fate. "Mom always said to add the herbs at the very end," I explained, though he probably knew this, "and to stir them in gently, folding rather than stirring in circles." Tyler nodded, taking the spoon. His hands trembled slightly as he sprinkled the herbs across the surface of the soup. Then, with careful concentration, he began folding them in, using the exact motion Susan had always used. "Like this?" he asked, looking up at me. "Just like that," I confirmed. "Just like your mother did it." We ate at my small table, the soup steaming in ceramic bowls alongside fresh bread from the bakery downtown. The first few spoonfuls were consumed in silence, both of us perhaps thinking about the last time we'd attempted to share this meal. "It's good," Tyler said eventually. "Really good. Tastes just like Mom's." "Well, it should. It's her recipe, to the letter." "I'm sorry for what I said before," he said, setting down his spoon. "About your cooking, about everything. I know you are." I'd heard various forms of apology from him over the past months. Each one mattered, but actions spoke louder. His consistent sobriety, his commitment to treatment, his steady job, these were the real apologies. "I've been working on making financial amends," he continued, "saving from each paycheck. I know it doesn't begin to cover what I took from you, but I want to pay it back, all of it, eventually." "I appreciate that," I said. "But there's something I need to tell you, something I've been working on too." I explained about the trust I'd established with my attorney. A portion of my retirement savings, and eventually the house would go into it, designated for Tyler but with strict conditions: continued mental health treatment, addiction recovery, and financial counseling. He would never have direct access to the principal, only to income from the trust, and only if he maintained recovery. If he relapsed into gambling or stopped treatment, the funds would be diverted to mental health charities instead. "You're still going to leave me something?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "After everything I did? You're my son," I said simply. "I love you. But I've learned that loving you doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. The trust is structured to support your recovery, not fund relapse." He was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. "That's fair," he said finally. "More than fair." We finished our soup and moved to the small living area with coffee. The conversation gradually shifted to safer topics: a movie Tyler had seen recently, my new neighbors upstairs, the vegetable garden Hal was helping me plant. As the evening drew to a close, I walked Tyler to the door. "Dad," he said, hesitating at the threshold, "there's something I've wanted to ask. That day when you were cooking the soup, and I came in and, you know, what was the crash I heard after I dumped the soup? What had you done that made me freeze when I saw it?" I smiled slightly at the memory. "I broke the lock on your bedroom door. Then I threw all your belongings on the front lawn." Tyler's eyes widened. "Really? You? Mr. By the Book, never break the rules?" "Sometimes rules need to be broken. Sometimes doors need to be broken into. I needed access to my whole house, and you needed to understand there would be consequences for your actions. It was the wake-up call I needed," he admitted. "Seeing you standing there on the lawn, phone in hand, surrounded by my stuff, it shocked me. Made me realize I'd pushed too far." "I wish it hadn't come to that," I said honestly. But I've learned sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is set a hard boundary. Your mother always knew that. Took me longer to figure it out. After Tyler left, I washed the dishes slowly, thinking about the evening. It hadn't been perfect. The easy rapport we'd once shared wasn't fully restored. Perhaps it never would be. But we were finding a new way forward, one careful step at a time. I thought about the journey of the past year, the Ladle incident that had started it all, the escalating theft and confrontations, the heart attack, the surgery, the long, slow process of healing both physically and emotionally. The hardest lesson I'd learned was that helping someone doesn't always look like what you expect. Sometimes it looks like throwing their belongings on the lawn and calling the police. Sometimes it looks like saying no when every instinct tells you to rescue them. Sometimes love requires tremendous courage to stand firm when someone you care about is drowning and trying to pull you under with them. In setting boundaries with Tyler, I hadn't abandoned him. I'd actually given him his best chance at recovery. By refusing to enable his destructive behavior, I'd shown him a path forward that neither of us could have seen if we'd continued in our old patterns. I glanced at the empty soup pot, now clean and put away. Susan's recipe had finally been properly prepared and properly appreciated. I could almost feel her approval. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Recovery never is. Tyler would face challenges and temptations. There would be difficult days for both of us. But for the first time in years, I felt genuine hope for my son's future and for our relationship. Sometimes the most important ingredient in any recipe for healing isn't found in the list of herbs and spices. It's found in the courage to season with truth, even when that truth is painful to swallow. Only then can the real healing begin. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? Sometimes the hardest part of caring for others is knowing when to step back and let them face consequences. If this story resonated with you, please share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else facing similar challenges. And if you found value in this story, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and I wish you courage in your own journey of setting healthy boundaries with those you love most.